Something happened to me last week that took me back. And if you look up here, put your notes down, whatever you're doing, and give me your full attention. I want to pastor you all for a second after the year we've had. I keep getting called into church situations when it's been a heartbreaking disaster for people, okay? It happened years ago in Santa Rosa, a great church in Santa Rosa. Their pastor, things fell apart. It was a disaster. The church was in shell shock. And they called and said, can you come preach? And what happened is Bayside Church over there, we sent a pastor over to preach every week for free for a year and a half. But I was the first person in. And I walked up and I looked into the faces and the sea of people. It was the largest church in Santa Rosa, brokenhearted people. They had just found out what happened. And I'm standing on stage. What do you say to them if you're me? What do you say to a broken-hearted church? That happened again last year. As a church I love called Willow Creek Church in Chicago. Probably at one point in time was America's largest church, okay? And it got hit with one crisis after another, and just devastating. And they called and said, hey, can Ray come out here and be our interim pastor? And and folks, to be honest with you, the minute I got this call, I was like, no, I'm already too busy. Willow Creek is so famous. If you go there, all of a sudden everybody knows you and media requests flood in. I actually met with my family and I said, look, if this happens, we're gonna be under a microscope even more than now. I don't need to do this. And pretty much what happened is Willow Creek's such a great church. I remember Andrew and I talked about it. We're like, if you can help Willow Creek, we should help Willow Creek. And so I went to Willow Creek, and I will never forget this. I walk into their 7,500 seat auditorium, way bigger, this puny little thing. And I walk into their auditorium, I look in the faces of these brokenhearted people who have gone through it, great people. What do you say to them? And then, backtrack before that, some of you this church gave $100,000 to help this church. Down in the desert, there's a church called Southwest Church. Anybody heard of it? Okay, because we talked about that. We took an offering for them. They had installed a pastor. The pastor had changed his views on human sexuality. And the church called me on a Thursday night and said, we're really sad. We've got to fire our pastor this weekend. The congregation has no idea. We're going to announce it's happening, and people are going to be blown away. There's been lies told to the newspapers like they're firing him because they hate gays, which is not true. And they said, but there are protesters that are going to be there. It's going to be a wreck. Can you come preach? Anybody want this? And so I flew down there, and they make the announcement, and they do one worship song, and then I walk out. What do you do? Like, what do you say in that situation? And fortunately, out of this passage, God told me what to say. And I did the same thing at all three places. And at Southwest, everybody's standing, half the people are crying, protesters are outside going crazy. And I looked at this sea of great people. And all I said was this: I'm really sorry. I'm really, really, I get choked up even thinking about this now. Whew, I'm really sorry. This is heartbreaking, tragic. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. Because I knew this guy, liked this guy. I'm so sorry. And then I said, I just want to pray. And I prayed the world's longest prayer. They're all still standing. And I said, before you sit down, half these people are crying. I'm crying now. And I said, I'm just so sorry. Would you just hug a few people, like hug 5 people? This is pre-COVID. Would you hug 5 people and just tell them God's still here? They did that. They sat down and they all looked and going, what's the word from God? And in all 3 settings, I said the same thing to them that I want to say to you. First of all, I'm so sorry that this year has been like it for you. Some of you have lost loved ones without ever getting to see them. Some of you had weddings with 10 people. Some of you have lost jobs. Some of you have lost your business. Some of you are in despair for political reasons. Some of you are despair, and I just want to say this, I am so sorry. But what I want to say is this, on the authority of God's word. God, I looked at this church and I said, God is working when it doesn't look like God is working. God is working when it doesn't look like God is working. When nothing's working, God is working. God has a plan. God has a future, and God is, the God of heaven will give you success, and you, his servants, will arise and build. And at some point, it will be better than ever because God is at work when it doesn't look like God is at work. Amen. And I said that, and last Sunday, I'm in Southern California in the desert. My wife, Carol, and my son, Mark, his wife, Gia, our brand new 3-month-old grandson, RJ, and my daughter, Leslie, we go to church at Southwest Church. Southwest Church, I was there for about a year and a half. You all gave $100,000 to get this church through their tough times. They hired a pastor named Ricky Jenkins. Remember Ricky? We've had him up here a bunch. And Ricky and I are friends. He and his wife and Carol and I had dinner last week. And we go to church, and I want to show you a picture of a church that thought they had no future. This is one of their outdoor Sunday morning services. See the little circles they put? They're like the old crop circles. They put everybody in these circles around to keep them safe, and they have this amazing service. That's just one of their services. That church, which thought they were done and everybody was predicting was over, is now larger, healthier, and better than has ever been in the history of the church. And when people didn't know that, when people thought they had no future, God was working when it didn't look like God is working. And I want to say the same thing to you. It's been a tough year. God is working in our country. God is working in your family. God is working when it does not look like God is working. All God's people say,